Faiez Rana, welcome to the show. How you doing, man?
Good, man. How are you?
Great. I'm excited. This is a unique approach for us on the show. I would say more often than not, we have people on that are more in like the service-based industry, and so this would be good to see more of the product-based industry and how you've been able to build something obviously super awesome here in Austin. And full disclosure, you offered me a free sample basically of the product this past week, and I haven't told you about my experience with it yet. And so I'm just gonna sum it up by saying there was one I had the other day that was like a maple glazed walnut salad or something like that.
Yeah.
Probably the best thing I've eaten
Really?
in, I gotta say, months.
That had beets in it, did
Yes.
you? How was that?
It was so good.
Beets are very polarizing.
Really?
Yeah.
It's like some people just like don't like them or they love them.
Most people will enjoy them once they're prepared the right way, but the word beets, people are just, I don't really know what that is. I'm going to steer clear of that.
Huh.
Yeah.
So I could sort of relate to that with like radishes. I feel like radishes kind of have the same effect.
Yeah. A lot of healthy foods are like that, right? Like if you left me to my own devices, I would make like broccoli and potatoes for my vegetables over and over again.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of why I was excited about it, is because generally speaking, I tried other products in the past of like misfit foods or imperfect foods. And the main reason I did it is because I was looking for just more variety in my diet. Otherwise, we kind of stick to eating the same things all the time, which is obviously one of the benefits of it. And also, too, one of the first conversations we had, too, was like, I was like, by the way, I'm not like vegan or vegetarian, right? Which is fine. I just throw like my own protein in there and then I'm good to go. So it doesn't really matter. But
what did you add?
just protein or chicken breast, basically.
Yeah.
Or
I saw you repost something yesterday. It looked like more of a red meat.
Oh, you know what that was? That was kimchi.
Ah, okay. Nice.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I'll throw kimchi or sauerkraut or something in there.
Okay.
Just because I love like acidic type foods.
Yeah. Yeah, you went with kimchi on top of a vinaigrette. That's very bold.
Yeah. Yeah, I love, so any sort of like acidity fermented type foods, I love that stuff. But so let's get into it. Enough about me, man. I obviously love what you guys are doing, and this is great in terms of a product and service. And so for anybody listening, basically it's a food delivery service here in Austin. You guys are expanding out to, you also deliver to Houston, and then now you're looking at also Dallas and San Antonio as well, correct?
Yep. Yeah.
So let's go back even before you guys started in this, in terms of like, do you have entrepreneurship in your family, and what does that look like?
Yeah. I mean, my dad's a corporate guy.
Do you want to get a little closer for me?
Yeah. My dad's a corporate guy through and through. IBM for several decades type of thing. The name of the game growing up was get good grades, go to a good college, and get a good job. But his dad was an entrepreneur, probably out of necessity, not out of aspirations. And then my mom's dad was a corporate guy. He worked for the UN, actually. They're both of my grandparents were in Pakistan. Both of my parents immigrated to the U.S. when they were in college. They met at the University of Houston. That's where I was born. But after both of my grandparents like grew up in poverty, my mom's dad was able to work his way up as an engineer into the UN, and eventually when he left the UN, he moved here because my mom and her older brother had settled in the U.S. and he opened a bunch of one at a time Burger Kings. He passed away when I was 3, but I think up until that point he had like worked his way from 1 to like 5 or 7 locations, and they lost it after he passed away. But I always grew up with like the lore of my grandfather, like studying by candlelight in a village in Pakistan, to earning a scholarship to Rutgers in New Jersey, to joining the UN, and then, you know, basically like the American dream for an immigrant through and through. So like from an early age, when I would go to a McDonald's or a Burger King, I would like be like, yeah, like I'm going to own these someday, because that's what my grandpa did. So I would, you know, count how many people were there. I wonder how many burgers they're selling. Okay, a burger is $1, so they're making $1 million a year. Like I would just do stuff like that from an early age. So in that sense, I think I was thinking entrepreneurially from early on.
Yeah, way to go a polar opposite route though, in terms of like health versus Burger King.
Yeah, my first legal business, like that was registered as an LLC, was junk food. I told you about it before we jumped on, but in college when I was like 20, I needed to pay my own bills because I had dropped out, and I needed to buy time for like figure out what I wanted to do with my life because I didn't want to do college anymore. So two of my roommates, I'd enlisted two of my roommates to go to Costco with me, and I had like a $2,000 limit on a credit card. I think it was actually my mom's credit card that I had for emergencies. And we went to Costco and bought like $1,000 worth of Skittles and Butterfingers and Gatorades and Red Bulls, and this was before Uber Eats and stuff, and we put it online, and our hours were 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. because I just remember being a college kid, and after like 1 a.m. it was like, we need chasers, like we need like all the garbage that we needed to fuel our partying life, and there was nowhere to go. So I ended up enlisting 4 roommates to be delivery drivers, and we collected orders every day, and had like a nice little I don't know, low 6-figure business.
How were you managing all these people? Was your phone just like blowing up, or what were you doing?
The orders came through Gmail, so I would just sit there and like refresh the inbox repeatedly, and a new order would come in, and we'd yell it out. It'd be like, whatever it was, 5 Doritos, whatever it was, chips, drinks. And, you just put the delivery address in your Google Maps and go deliver it. It was like very basic, like truly anybody could have done it. But I think, we were talking about this too. That's how you get good at entrepreneurship versus staying in your head, is you just do the shitty thing. I had friends in fraternities at that point, so I would go to the fraternities and be like, just buy your chasers through us, and they would be like, yeah, fuck yeah, bro. Like, this is awesome. Like, you just started your own business. Like, yeah. So, they would buy 50 Red Bulls or whatever, and they would just buy it through our website, and I would go take it to them. And, you make $1 on 50, and you do that for many frats. And we had regulars. We had like regulars that were probably just getting high at night and playing video games or doing whatever they were doing, and they would get their munchies from us. So.
I love the hustle. I mean, that's one of those hustle businesses. I often think about, like, there's a lot of ways to build a business, and some of them are like super total just like hustle mode, and you can make it work, versus other ones like you have to put up a lot more upfront energy before it actually works. This is one where it's like, yeah, I'm just going to deliver as many products as I can to people. Do you think if it wasn't for your partner/spouse now with your business, you would still be like in the junk food quote unquote space?
No, I stopped a little over a year later because I never started thinking like, it was basically, do you know what GoPuffs is? Mm-mm. GoPuff, like if you're in college now, you know what GoPuff is, and it's basically what we were doing, except at scale now. It's like a multi-billion-dollar company.
They just deliver snack foods, or what?
They literally just deliver. It's an online convenience store. That's all it is. Like, think of a 7-Eleven, except you just order it online and it comes to your door.
Got it.
I didn't think it was a great business idea. I didn't think this is what I want to do. I didn't think, oh, we're going to scale nationally. I was just like, I need to pay like whatever, $400 a month in rent. I need to buy my groceries, and I want to like figure out what I'm doing with my life. And it was, a middle finger to my parents, mostly my dad, because he was like, if you're not doing school, then, I don't think I talked to him for a long time during that period because I wasn't following the path, and I couldn't say what I wanted to do. Like, nothing that came out of my mouth was a good plan at that time. And so I just needed to be like, fuck you, I'm going to figure it out. And that was just my way of figuring it out during that time as a 19, 20, 21-year-old.
Because you were in college for 3 or 4 years, was it?
Yeah, University of Colorado, Boulder.
Yeah.
So I ended up transferring to another college a couple years later. But I got like 64 of those credits to transfer over.
And you never finished, though?
I'm still 32 credits short.
Yeah. This is one of those things where, and I don't say that in terms of like to make fun of you in any way, shape, or form. I think of it in terms of, I think it's great to understand sunk cost, because most people don't. If you're not familiar with that philosophy, it's basically just understanding that just because you put time and money and energy into resources doesn't mean it's inherently valuable. right? So like even though you made it X number of credits versus what you could have been, it doesn't necessarily mean you should have done the extra credits depending upon what you were looking to do next. So what did that transition look like going from, okay, I ran this like junk food business, I want to get out of college, to kind of the next steps?
Yeah, I was also supplementing a little bit after I stopped that. I still didn't go back to college, but I ended up starting to tutor high school kids. And some people may be familiar with like AP and IB. Like those were more of the advanced programs in high school, I guess. And so I started tutoring math and English and SAT preparation. So I could charge like 2,500. I think it was either 25 to 3,500 per student for like a 6-week preparation or an 8-week preparation. So I started doing that. I did that for probably 2 years, but like 1 year after the junk food business. I mean, my mom always encouraged my dreamer side, and my dad was scared by it. But now, you know, when you get older, like I'm 29, I'm turning 30 a couple months, 4 or 5 months. And you start to like appreciate the things maybe you resented about your parents when you were in your teenage years. And so like I totally appreciate the hard lessons that my dad was teaching me during that time. They make me who I am now. But at that time I resented him hardcore for it. After a year of tutoring kids, and I was very inspired by working with these high school kids. Like I developed really good relationships with them. They would actually like do better in school. I helped a number of them get into like their dream colleges, like really good colleges, like Babson and USC, like things that I took the time to not only like help them get the scores that they needed, but like really understand like, hey, I noticed that you really take to the writing portion, you don't really take to this portion, or like you really take to these classes, but you don't take to these classes. Like, what is it about that makes it more interesting for you to learn? And they'd be like, well, this, that, and the other thing. And I'd be like, well, based off of what I know, I think you might be interested in these colleges because I've heard they have these programs and those programs. I still stay in touch with at least a couple of them, and like they finished college at those places and they were like, it was great. And so I was really inspired, like, you know what, we could be doing high school better. We could be doing school better, period. And so I wanted to start like a chain of private schools that would, focus on cultivating hard skills as well as like self-awareness, things that would help kids understand like this is what I want to offer the world, or at least understand themselves a little bit better. That led to my mom convincing me to try to finish college. I was like, the only way that I will go back to college is if I like do something really interesting. So I ended up going back for another like 60 something credits. And for whatever reason, I can't do the math right now, only a certain number of them applied. I think I took a number that were just purely out of interest that didn't apply to like the mandatory credits that I needed to graduate. One of them was a class where I met my now wife. And it was a graduate level class, but I was a undergrad at the time. And it was called Creative Thinking for Organizational Success, something like that. It was like a master's level business course. And we met in that class, and it was like one of those summer classes where it was 3 weeks long, 4-6 hours a day or whatever, and then you'd have to study all day because it was just intensive like that. So we spent that whole summer in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and we were paired on a project. And so like we really, really spent all day with each other. And before we got paired in those projects, we had to take a personality assessment. And so they were teaching us sort of like a project management tool, which is going from clarification to ideation to development to implementation. And they were like, most people fall into one or two of these buckets. Like they have a preference for one or two of these buckets. And my wife fell into the implementation category, like hardcore. And you can see that in her personality. You can't talk to her about a problem or an idea for more than 3 seconds before she's trying to do something about it. And I fall very heavily into the clarification and ideation portion of it, where I'm trying to understand like, what are we actually trying to do here? Like, what are we trying to solve for? Okay, these are the number of approaches we could take. And then she is like, okay, shut the fuck up. Like, we just got to take one of these and go. So we worked really well together. And we just became like leaders naturally in the class as a duo. And we spent all day together, first as partners, and then we were both like, oh, like, we're spending a lot of time with each other. We like each other. So we just started dating.
Wow. Okay, so the reason this brings so much joy to my life right now, so that trip that I just got back with from those group of guys in Tennessee, one of those guys on that trip, his name is Joey, shout out to him. And we sort of got into a kerfuffle about, he's been trying to do this like motorcycle tour that like goes all across America. And he's 100% like your spouse, where he's pure execution. Like thinking and planning is not in his wheelhouse, to the point where the last time he tried to do this trip, he decided to do it on an e-bike with like a 300 pounds of gear behind him. Long story short, basically his e-bike ran out of energy. So he had to pedal like for miles and miles and miles. And it turned out to be like a total pain in the ass, against the wind, like all these issues. And I didn't go with him because I'm sitting on the sidelines like, no, man, like, planning this looks stupid. Like, you obviously have no idea what you're doing. He's like, no, man, I just execute. I just do stuff. And that's exactly how he sounds. And the only reason I bring that up is because, like, we literally got to do a kerfuffle about this, like, coming trip of, like, he's pure execution. He's like, I don't want to talk about anything. I just want to do it. And I'm over here, like, planning and organizing our next trip, right?
Yeah.
If it wasn't for, like, both, though, nothing would get done.
Totally.
So, which I want to transition to about this relationship with your spouse in terms of, so how have you seen this play out in your business now? Because I have a lot of people in the show who, some people are like, I would never have a business partner. And actually that same guy I was talking about, Joey, he actually has a business partner, James, who they they have a business together, a brokerage. And they do great and they love it. And so you obviously see both sides. And I'm curious as to what's your experience been like, and like what could other people learn from that?
I can't imagine doing it without a partner. There's a really good book on this, Principles by Ray Dalio.
Oh, yeah. I haven't read it, but I'm familiar.
I mean, he really talks about the foundation of his success coming from understanding that people's brains work differently. And frankly, that's extremely uncomfortable. It's really easy in theory to believe in like meritocracy, that, you know, the best idea should win. But when you sit in a room with people whose brains work differently, it's really easy to get defensive about things. And so the advantage comes from overcoming the initial sort of ego flare-ups that come with that. You know, somebody that prefers to think things through versus get things done. Like, once you can get on the other side of that, depending on the context of the situation, different people's viewpoints are bringing better solutions to the table. And over the last 6 years of our business, my wife and I have continuously had to get better at working with one another. One thing we've always known, although our egos have gotten in the way at different points of the journey, we have always known that we're better together. And you just, over time, you know, improvement doesn't happen by itself. It has to be intentional. And so as long as we're actively thinking about it and trying to get better at it, we understand, like, okay, you're better at this, you're better at this. I'm better at this, you're better at that. And these are where we're both not that great, so let's come together or figure out how to recruit people that can, you know, fill those gaps.
Do you have any sort of like practical exercises or things that you do that maybe people could take away from that? Because I think in theory, a lot of people understand like different personality types and Myers-Briggs, and which is important to know. But at the same time, unless, like you said, unless you're intentional about like working through those things, it doesn't really matter. So like, what do you guys do to figure that stuff out?
I mean, that's super non-business related. That's meditation and reflection and
awareness
and emotional intelligence and emotional discipline, and learning soft skills like how to communicate effectively and constructively, and practical things like, okay, what I hear you say is fill in the blank. Is that right? Okay, this is what I think. Rather than like, yeah, okay, I get it, and, or but. It's like, it's as practical as yes and versus no but type of conversation. And those things are fucking hard in practice. You know, like, I say this all the time to my friends. It's like there's no shortage of information in the world now. You all probably know exactly what to do. It's a matter of practicing that stuff now. So it's really easy in a heated debate where you genuinely think you're right to stop listening to the other person and just wait for them to stop so you can keep jamming your conviction down their throat. It's not productive.
Totally. Yeah, I totally agree. I just actually recently posted about that, of how like we're more likely to die to some degree in overconsumption than underconsumption. And that's in every realm. That's in knowledge, that's in food, that's in people, that's in noise, that's in a lot of stuff, right? Is like we now live in the weirdest time ever of all of human history, where it's like things have flipped in reverse. And the people that are winning to some degree, depending upon how you define success, are the people that are able to like filter all that noise and focus on the things that actually matter. And so for you guys as a food delivery service, which I love the simplicity of what you guys are doing in like the general idea of like what you're doing. You're providing whole foods to people that generally probably don't eat whole foods that often, which is amazing. What are the things that you guys try to really focus on to make sure that you feel like you are making progress as a business?
Top line revenue in terms of growth, bottom line profit in terms of business model and efficiency, customer lifetime value, customer acquisition, retention. Those are like the main things that I look at, and then you can break that down into infinitely more interesting things. You know, why is churn this way? Okay, let's look at a retention analysis or a cohort analysis. Like, why is customer acquisition this number? Well, let's break it down by channel. Like, but at the surface, it's really, I mean, you can just start with revenue and expenses.
Do you feel like there's certain things that you do, if you get them right, that it just like trickles into seeing success in all of those areas?
No, I don't think so. And I don't think it's an end state either. It's truly like an ongoing thing. Like at every stage, I've had questions, and once you answer a question, it just creates more questions. It's ongoing, and you either love that or you don't. And hopefully you love it, because if you don't, I don't know that this is the game for you.
I totally agree. It's the infinite game, right?
Yeah, it's awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
And you combine that with what you were just saying, is getting back to the essentials. Like, you can go down an infinite data rabbit hole of trying to figure out X, Y, and Z, which is fine. I love to do that. And then I reel it back to the essentials. Like, okay, what is it? The clarifier in me is like, okay, well, what does this really mean? Is this useful? Even though I have more of a proclivity to the clarification and ideation, I have developed over the decade or whatever that I've been doing this, is when it's enough and it's time to act. And also when it's not the right time to act and you need to think about something. And so, you know, the thing about podcasts is everybody resonates with different people. And so maybe there are people listening that resonate with me. And I'm definitely more on the thoughtful side and less inclined to take action. But I have 100% trained myself into like consistent, deliberate, continuous action just every day, right? And I've had to develop for my wife, that's not a problem. She didn't need to train herself into like taking action every day. I did. She has to train herself into like thinking before she speaks and thinking about if she's acting on the most productive things, right? So we have opposite problems.
Totally. Yeah, that's actually a really good point. And just to recap that, because I definitely fall into the exact same category that you do, in terms of, it's so often that we're told like measure twice and cut once. But I feel like for people like you and me or anybody else listening to the show, is that oftentimes that just turns into excessive measuring and no cutting actually happens. And it's just a way to basically procrastinate what you should actually be doing. And a mantra for me, and that could hopefully be helpful for others in that situation, for people who are more of like the thinking and planning side, is I often tell myself is less thinking and more doing, because I can fall into that category of over planning and over analyzing, versus the opposite of somebody else listening to the show who maybe is on that side of like they just take a lot of action or they say a lot of words, I guess you could say. Maybe they need to take an opposite approach of like more thinking and less doing, making sure that they're actually taking on the action on the things that actually matter.
Yeah. Really thinking about what you're doing matters, right? But if you haven't started your business yet, that is probably the opposite of the solution for you. Like, think about me delivering junk food. That's just getting to it. You know what I mean? And when we started this business, and just to give context, I guess, we're almost 6 years in, Greater Austin, Houston, San Antonio coming soon, Dallas, coming within the next 6 months, about 40 something employees, low to mid 7 figures. So there's like a real business there. We're past the point of, is this idea going to work? We have real employees and all that. Nowhere close to what I want to take this. But when we started, it was literally like my wife, I was still in the phase of life where I didn't know what I wanted to do. I thematically, directionally knew that I liked entrepreneurship, that I wanted to do something that I thought was net positive for society, hopefully work towards a larger solution to a big problem. But my wife she made organic, plant-based, real foods in mason jars. She was like, we don't put plastic in this fridge. And she taught me, like, why are you using, at the grocery store, she would be like, don't put those vegetables in those plastic bags, just put it in the cart. I'd be like, what are you talking about? That's disgusting. And she's like, no, it's not. It's not. Just wash it when we get home before you use it. I was like, oh, okay. So like, she really turned me around to like a different way of thinking about food and just sort of consumption in general. But I had taken like a jar of a salad to my aunt in Houston who was pregnant at the time or had just had a baby. And she ate it and she made this one comment. She goes, whoa, I would pay for this. I was like, oh, interesting. I called my girlfriend at the time, my wife now. She was back in Austin. I was in Houston. And I'm like, I wonder if we get like 5 to 10 people to just, buy like this for meal prep every week, and we could charge X and, make an extra couple $1,000s a month. And I could save up to start the school that I wanted to start, or buy myself time to figure out where to get money for that.
What were you doing for work at the time, just to clarify?
This was right off of the back of the whole tutoring phase.
Okay.
I had like a few $1,000s saved up. I moved to Austin to live with her, and I was not working.
Okay. So you were like, okay, tutoring isn't my like lifetime goal. You were kind of looking for that next thing. Yeah. And this kind of showed up.
I think it showed up within 1 month of being here because my brain was like, I need income. I need to do something. I was applying for jobs and I was like, oh my God, this is so miserable. Like, I don't want to do this. So immediately my brain goes, if I could just get 10 people to sign up, like I wouldn't have to apply to a fucking job. Like, that's what my brain. And so it was like, immediately it was like, okay, just put up the most basic website, put up the most basic Instagram. This takes 24 hours to do. Then just start DMing people. Hey, I'll give you a salad for free or a smoothie for free if you just give me feedback on this. I did that with 5, 10, 15, 20 people, got feedback. And we ended up reaching out to a cycling studio that's like literally I could throw a rock and hit it from where we're recording right now. And I was like, can we come table at your studio? And they were like, you know what would be better than that? There used to be a Daily Juice right next door to the studio. And when our clients would come in before the class, at the counter, they would write what smoothie they wanted. And Daily Juice would have that waiting here for when they walked out. Can y'all do that for us? And we go, of course.
Yeah.
Little did they know that we were in a studio apartment across the street. And, from there, boom, our first dollar was made. We have it in our HQ. I think it's like maybe a $20-something check for like 2 smoothies. And every morning we wake up at 4 a.m., start getting orders at 5, 6, 7, 8, like on the hour for every cycling class. And in our Gmail, just like the Munchie Buffs, like the junk food delivery, I'd see my email. Okay, there are 8 smoothie orders for this class, and I just pop out my Vitamix and blend them and rush them over there. And from there, I was like, you know what? Smoothies aren't that much of a value add. There's Juice Land, there's these other places, but there's not that many people that are doing this with real fresh food. There's Blue Apron and blah, 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 but we could dissect why those aren't the healthiest options later. So I was like, let's start like marketing the food. And by marketing, I mean like a little sign at the counter that we also do food. Boom. First customer, Lee Cortinas. I remember she called us and was like, can you tell me more like about the food? She spent like $120 with us. And it was just like super unsexy, not thoughtful. Like this is heavy implementation zone, right? And it was just following the breadcrumbs. And it was, the thoughtful part was listening. Like, what are they really getting value out of here? Like when somebody spends $1 with you, I would think that you should ruthlessly ask yourself, why in the fuck did they just spend $1 with me? Why did they just spend $1 with me? Like they worked for that $40. What about you made it compelling? And so you ask these questions, and over weeks and months and years, you think you have an idea, so you lean into that part, right? Well, I think they like it because they watched a documentary about plant-based and they know that it might be good for them, but they don't know how to do it. So they found us, and we make it easier for them to incorporate more plants into their diet. Okay, let's talk about that more. Let's find more people like that. Then you get one person tells another. And before you know it, you have thousands of customers and millions of dollars in revenue.
I've heard you talk about this before. I just want to recap what you're saying. And what I'm really hearing you say is just like how important it is to really listen to your customers. And you've obviously put the time and energy to really understand what their drives and motivations are in life. I'd be curious as to, has that grown or changed over the years, or does it continue to be the same thing that these people are asking or looking for within the business?
Yeah, great question. It changes. Yeah, it changes. We're going through major pivots right now because it goes back to like understanding the essentials of the value that you provide. And over the years, you know, one of our core ethos is we're zero waste. So unlike any other meal delivery, you said you tried a few, you get a box with a bunch of plastic, or maybe they say it's recycling. Recycling is its own issue. Mm-hmm. With us, you get a bag with jars, ice packs, everything, and you just put it right back outside, and it's going to get collected, and you don't throw a thing away in the trash. So zero waste is our core thing for us. Organic regenerative sourcing is a thing for us. So like everything is good for you and good for the planet. When we started, it was very much a plant-based forward menu. It still is. But one of the key shifts that we're making over the next 6 months is we're going to start incorporating some regeneratively raised animal products. And, you know, you might think that that's a really scary thing, but not if you're listening to the customer. And, you know, the vast majority, and I mean 90+% of our customers aren't vegan. We only have 2 vegans working in the company, so like the ratios are consistent there. And the reason that they're coming to us is because they want to get more plants in their diet. But if you ask them, they're still eating meat and they're buying it from somewhere else. And when I ask them about it, because I talk to customers all the time, every week I text every new customer that we get to ask how it was and if they have anything, and half respond with feedback, and there's a line of communication. I can talk to them anytime. And what you hear is that, you know, they're actually not buying it from the most responsible sources that are not the healthiest for them and that aren't the healthiest for the environment. So I'm like, well, I know they trust us. They're buying from us for a reason. So if we started preparing meat and selling it to them, they would probably buy it from us versus where they're currently buying it. And that is coming from a place of listening versus having an ideology about things. And I know some people are going to get upset, and that's okay. Over time, that leads to potentially people thinking you're a sellout and whatnot, but that's okay. At any level of success, people are going to criticize you. But we know what our mission is, and it's good for you, good for the planet, to give more to the planet than we take. And if we can serve regenerative meat on the menu, not in everything, but it's there, we still fulfill our mission. We're giving more to the planet than we take. It's good for you and for the planet.
This reminds me of just a basic business philosophy that I think a lot about, is that I think too often we try to create a key and then find a lock for it. And you've done reverse, is that you found a lock, is people were asking you for a solution, and you basically created the key for it, right? People were already looking for the solution. The lock was already there. You've essentially just created the system to make it accessible to so many people. Because honestly, everything you're describing about you listening to your customers is literally me verbatim. Like literally, that was the beginning of this conversation, was like, yeah, I'm always looking for ways to get more plants into my diet, but then I just throw my own protein in it.
Right.
You're basically like, well, why don't we just do that for you?
Exactly.
Essentially.
Exactly.
So it's great that you found this this way to really have that two-way conversation with your business. I want to kind of get into some of the growing pains of that, right? Is like, as you continue to partner with like farmers and other people in town and and you get more customers and you have more just demand, essentially, how did you make that transition of like trying to bring people on, making sure you have enough product to be able to serve everybody? Like, what did that scaling process sort of look like for you guys?
When we started, it was purely out of this, like, can this work? Can this work question got solved within about 3 years. I don't know, depending on who you are, that's either not a lot of time or a lot of time. But in about year 2 or 3, I was like, I could start to see a vision. Like, I could start to see long term. But in the first year or 2, I was just like, can people buy this?
Figure it out.
Right. And then like, so year like 0 to 2 was like, is this idea viable? Then it goes from like year 2 to 5. Well, is this product and business model viable? Okay, people want it, but you still have to be able to do it in a cost-effective way and charge enough for it that, you make more than you spend to serve the product. So now our next phase, like our next 5-year framework, is definitely to get to mid 8 figures, a substantial leap in scale. And now it's much more about scaling existing acquisition channels, recruiting the right executives, developing the right. Oh, that's my phone. My bad.
Oh, you're good.
I have an alarm every 2 hours that reminds me to take 3 deep breaths. And it's not like, I'm so stressed. It's like to become aware of each breath that I take for at least 3. And so I'll be sitting in a meeting and that'll go off, and I just become very present with my breath while we're doing exactly what we're doing. And it's like part of my key for staying balanced, because you got to work probably 6 to 7 days a week, and you can't structure your life in ways that somebody with a 9 to 5 has. So I have to find like moments in my day where I can refill my tank. And so that alarm is like a little system that I got a pro tip from one of my mentors.
Pattern disrupts. That's what we call that. We
Yeah.
use that a lot when on our trip out to Tennessee. I don't want to diverge our conversation here, but like we use that on our trip out to Tennessee, where we use like one of those like meditation bells, and we always just had a little dowel next to it. And so whenever somebody rings it, everybody stops what they're doing. They pause until the ringing's over, and they just pay attention to their breath. And it is a life hack, right?
Magical.
Especially if you can schedule it on your phone. I remember like back in the day too, like when people had pagers. Obviously like that's way long ago, but like you could set it so it'd like buzz you and remind you. Similar idea, but it's just a pattern disrupt, right?
It's again one of those things that's very simple. You just have to do it, and do it with intention. And oh man, I just wish more people would do the simple things, because man, it's so magical. Like I've given that tip to a couple employees. One of my mentors gave it to me, and I actually did it. I heard him say that he tried it once, and he stopped doing it. I kept doing it, and I told him, I'm like, dude, this is amazing. So anyways, people can pick up the tools they hear, or they can't. So going back to the original question, I swear, like the beginning phases, like let's call it 0 to 100, 0 to a million, you are just grinding because you have to do everything. You have to grind. It is exhausting. It is all three: blood, sweat, and tears, for sure. And so many people quit during this time. But the beautiful thing about being able to hear others' entrepreneurial journeys is that you should expect it. You're not going to avoid it, so don't put any energy in trying to avoid it. Just, it's that saying, like, seasons come and go, this too shall pass. Like, just be aware that it's coming, and you do your best to navigate, to grind. But then something happens, like, around the million mark, I guess, and you can delegate. You have the resources to delegate to others. So, like, I don't cook, I don't clean, I don't deliver, I don't even manage those tasks anymore. That's what all our employees do. They're part of the production and fulfillment of the product. But you have to become an extremely effective, I've had to become an extremely effective communicator during those times. And that's a very obvious thing you would think, but I've learned that my wife and I are holding 1,001 assumptions in our head that we think are obvious. And it's a process of digging out the assumptions that you think are obvious and putting them either into documents or trainings or rituals or whatever it may be so that it's effectively communicated. I mean, it's as simple as, like, I remember the first time when we did like a climate survey, like I'd send out a form, employees would fill it out. And we scored really low, like a 1 or 2 out of 5 on, like, I know what the 5-year vision for the company is. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, how does nobody know what the vision is? I know what the vision is. Like, isn't it obvious?
Right.
And so I was like, I started learning through those feedback forms. I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I have to be, it does become the job of the CEO or the founder to, like, communicate the vision. I used to cringe at people that said they were the visionary, and it's like, actually that is a job that requires skill to communicate that and make sure that people keep their eye on the prize and work through the set of values that you've hopefully thought out, laid out, and incorporate in your day-to-day routines, that you hire and fire by those things, that you reward and punish by those things. And so that became the job, like 1 to 3 million. And from there it's like, you're really talking about, like, okay, I really have a thing that works, like, not only from an idea to a product to, like, a management perspective, like, we can get this done over and over and over again, and we know how to do it. So now you're going to the next level, which is, like, in my head, I'm always thinking, because in our production facility right now, we serve Austin and Houston, and we will serve Dallas and San Antonio out of the same facility. But when we go to our next region, let's say Chicago will be serving, Chicago, Indianapolis, Nashville, like, it'll serve a region. We have regional facility. And so in my head, I'm like, are our systems, is our communication, is everything clear enough? Is our playbook clear enough that 2 or 3 facilities could be doing the same thing at the same time? And when a problem arises, they know how to solve the problem. I preach, like, a one folder mindset. Like, I need to be able to take this folder and give it to another team, and they should be able to execute what we can execute here in Austin. So the problems, like, have evolved over time.
Totally.
I don't think if I had started with solving the problem, you can't skip steps. So if I had tried to solve for this when we were starting, I would have just been some fucking idiot trying to create an elaborate plan when I didn't need to create an elaborate plan. I needed to see if anybody would spend money on the thing I was trying to sell.
Totally. Yeah, you hit on something that many of my mentors have said. A couple of things that I just want to recap just so everybody gets the message out of this is, one of them is, it's often told to me that getting to your first 6 figures has always been one of the hardest, because you just straight don't have the capital to outsource anything. And so you're literally wearing all the hats and doing everything yourself. And the other piece that I wanted to pull out of that I think is so important for people to hear is that idea of don't solve problems that don't yet exist. Is like, what is literally the next step? If you haven't even started, maybe the first step is, like, to your point of, like, well, has anybody asked you to buy it, or does somebody even want to buy anything yet? Because I think so often I talk to people a lot, and I'm sure you have similar conversations of people that come for business advice, and they, especially for me in the marketing spaces, they're asking me for a website or advertisement or whatever it is. And I'm always like, are you playing business or do you have a business? Because like oftentimes a website is just a business card if you don't even have a business yet. Like, do you even have a customer? Do you have any idea who you even actually want to help? Because until you can even start from ground zero, anything I do from a marketing standpoint, kind of like what we talked about in the beginning of like, it's not even going to help you. Like, it's just going to make the problem honestly worse, and you're solving problems that don't even yet exist. Get a customer before you can even worry about any of the other stuff.
Yeah.
And so that kind of leads me to my next question of what's the most expensive mistake you've made? And that could be monetarily or emotionally.
Wow. I know the answer to that question. So we were bootstrapped up until last summer when we raised a little under $500,000. And
Side note, how did you raise that money?
a combination of angel investors who were our customers and a platform called Republic. It was a crowdfunding, equity-based crowdfunding platform. So we probably raised like $300K crowdfunding so people could write. We set the minimum at $200 up to, I think our highest on there was $25K. And then we raised like $100K just like on bigger checks off platform.
And was this so you could basically scale into San Antonio and Dallas and stuff, or what?
Yeah. And I didn't use that money very wisely. And, you know, it actually came from not spending it quickly enough. Yeah. When you raise money, you need to be ready to spend it very quickly, because what you end up doing when you fundraise is you end up increasing your expenses. That's the investment portion. Like, you invest in certain activities that will yield you certain results. So I ended up like hiring certain people to build out certain aspects of whether it was customer acquisition or R&D or production, like whatever it may be. And I didn't spend enough on advertising. I should have spent more on advertising to hit our target acquisitions. But I was in the bootstrap mentality of trying to spend as little as possible to yield a result. Whereas if you're going to raise venture capital, especially, I heard like the founder of HubSpot say, he's like, venture capital, all it is a middleman between startups and Google and Facebook ad spend. And I was like, yeah, that's interesting. That's a lesson I learned, because I remember like several months ago, I had to sit down one of our investors, like one of our bigger investors, and I was like, I didn't do a good job. Like, I had to get real with him. I was like, I didn't get to where I said we were going to go with the strategy that I laid out. He sat down with us for like an hour and we broke it down. And he was like, you spent like a quarter of the money that you needed to spend. He's like, you spent 10 grand, you needed to spend 40 grand because you had your customer acquisition costs dialed in. You knew that it would work through X and Y channels. You just needed to spend more. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So lesson learned. And there's some other caveat lessons to that, which is like, which business models do you need to fundraise for versus which you maybe shouldn't or don't need to.
Where does this one fall into that category?
We don't need to. Actually, we were going to raise $750K from a VC. Like, we had spent like 4 July through November in due diligence with them. Got through all the hard work, and man, that was a rigorous process. And it was so valuable in and of itself, because it made me like crunch the numbers of our business and the strategy in such immense detail, like I had never done it before, that I became way smarter about our business through the process. But like in the final meeting, all I had to do was sign it. Like, we were at the signing meeting, and our CFO at the time like had told me on the call before, she was like, don't do this. You don't need this money. And I was like, but I want to. I was like, I want it. Like, I want to say I raised VC. I want to have $750K in the bank to spend. Like, I want to achieve this. I wanted to achieve it. But she was like, the business doesn't need it. Like, you had the power to do whatever you want to do. She's like, but you don't need it. And that was one of the moments of self-awareness where like I recognized that in myself. I was like, I just want to achieve this, but it's not what's best for the business. And so I told them no. And that was very hard. That was a very hard thing to do because I was like, my dad was finally going to be proud of me. He was like, because I remember when we told him when we went up to Dallas to pitch and do the whole thing, and I was like, yeah, I just crushed this VC pitch. Like I'm for sure they're going to invest. And he was like, wow, like that's good. Like he finally was, giving me some props, and I was like, no, we're not doing it. He was like, why? Why aren't you doing it? But the thing is that there are certain industries where you need, like software, you need to spend a lot up front before you can monetize. So Google couldn't monetize without, however many users that they had, because the users are what they monetize. And so you need to hire the software engineers up front to get the platform to provide the service that will attract all the millions of users, and 1 million users for software is not enough. And so you have to raise VC. But we were making money from the first product we sold, right? And around the 1 million mark, we were doing it profitably. And so when you do a thing profitably, you have access to other types of financing, and you can reinvest in the business. And so actually that VC told me, he was like, I want y'all to use this $750K, and I want y'all to get to like 20 million and don't raise anything in between. He's like, just take this now and don't raise around until 20 million. And once you get to 20 million, we'll figure out if you even need to raise any more or not. Maybe we'll just keep growing from there. He called it taking 2 bites at the apple or something like that. And I was like, wow, this guy's, first of all, he's way more successful. They're way more successful than me. And they're telling me that they don't think we'll need to raise again in the future. So I was like, why do I think we need to raise money again in the future? And so I'm like, all my plans are, all the projections are based off of growing the business without outside capital at this point.
Ego is a tricky thing, man, to be able to step back from that. Because, like, yeah, you're staring down the pipeline of $750,000, close to $1 million. It would take a lot to say no to something like that, especially when you have this vision now that's so ingrained of where you want to go with this business. It's basically like, well, here you go. Here's your opportunity to build this business. As somebody who's as self-aware as you are, obviously, we don't have to get into childhood traumas, but I heard you touch on something about like your father and him being proud of you. Is that a huge motivator for you? No.
It was like, I have a brother who's 3 years younger than me, and he's still trying to get out of the grips of trying to make dad proud. So I talked to him about how that can change if you want it to change. And that changed for me probably a couple of years ago. I think most like practically after I got married, because like my purpose is not to make my dad proud through my success anymore. Like I have a family to take care of. I have a wife to take care of. We want to have kids, and I want to be able to do those things. Like I have my own shit to do. And I have a new relationship with my dad now. Like I can, I'll tell him when things aren't. I used to not tell him when things were not going well. Like I'd only tell him the good things. I tell him when things, it's a little bit uncomfortable still, but I'm like, yeah, this isn't going well. Or I told him the other day, I was like, man, if I don't achieve this goal, then I was wrong. And, sometimes I'd be like, I don't know if I'm good enough to do this. Like, I'll be honest with him about stuff like that. And I could tell he's like taken aback. He's like, whoa, I don't know what to do with this honesty from my son, because he's so used to me like hiding myself from him. Because I could never live up to his expectations. Like he's a super high performer. Like my dad's super type A, like climbed to the top of the corporate ladder thing, and it just changed.
Yeah.
And it changed through my own wanting it to change and being like, how do I change this? Like, why do I always want his approval in a conversation? Why do it had a lot to do with something I learned through my wife. I used to present to the world only the good side as well, because that's what I did with my dad. Like, I would only tell the other people the good things about my life, like what was going well, and I wouldn't share the bad things or what I was struggling with. And my wife is the opposite of that. She's an open book, and she's way more magnetic than I am in a room. Like, she has a personality that she's there when she's in a room. I'm not like that. And it's because she's just like, whatever comes to her head, she says. And that's what attracted me to her. I was like, how do you do that? Like, that's so interesting. Like, how do you just say whatever is on your mind like that? And so over time, as she got to know me better, she's like, why don't you share that about yourself? Like, she would notice and she's like, why didn't you share that? Or why did you say it like that? Like, I know you feel this way about it. And I was like, I don't know. And over time I was like, I guess I'm ashamed, or, I learned, I was like, why don't I try not to be? And I'll just be honest. And I learned to be honest over time, and it's served me really well. So
I have so much love and respect for people who are unapologetically themselves. The name that always comes to mind for me is Kanye West. Is like, he's obviously very polarizing as a human, right?
Yeah, I respect a lot of things about him.
Yeah, right. And it's something that I'm 34 now, and it's something that I've had to learn over many, many years, like we all do, of just like learning how to fully show up as yourself and not really hide anything, which is actually a big reason why, not to bring up the trip again, but these trips that I just took out to the Smoky Mountains with this group of guys, is like, that is so much of what this is rooted in, is creating time and space to talk about the things that are really going on in our lives, to show up as our authentic, true selves, and just show that with the group and talk about it and be open and vulnerable. Because like, if you don't do it, it's going to show up in some way, shape, or form in your life anyways. So it's essential just to let it shine.
And probably not in a good way.
Right.
There is a flip side to that, which is like oversharing.
Sure.
And that's the flip side that I've had to teach my wife a little bit. It's like, you don't have to go all the way out there like that, like maybe but there is a sweet spot, and it's been the most liberating thing personally for me to learn that skill of being honest with others. And for me, honesty was the sharing of a thing, not necessarily like saying that a thing happened differently than it did. It was just the holding back that was the dishonest part. And so just becoming more open with that. And I don't know how much time we have left, but I got sober several years ago, and I think that repression of myself, along with some other childhood trauma, which we could talk about or not, I was super addicted to drugs in my early 20s. And part of recovery is like getting honest with yourself. And one of the things you learn is like, one of the surefire ways to fall back into addiction is to start being dishonest with people again. And so like, I'm actually very scared to lie now, or to make a truth sound a little bit better than it is, because I'm like, ooh, that's the behavior that took me to a really dark place. So how about we don't do that?
Well, what's interesting about that is something my mentor said to me that just rings again and again in my head all the time, about just the honesty. And I'm really glad we're talking about this, just as like a little side shuttle here about this conversation. But he said that the only reason you lie is because you care more about what other people think about you than you think about yourself. And when he said that to me, it was like my mind exploded. And it made me realize so clearly in that moment, is like, you're right. Is like, I'm lying because I'm trying to show some side of me that doesn't actually exist, or like inflate some part of my life that isn't real. And not only does it actually hide the truth from others, but it also hides the truth from yourself.
Bingo. Yeah.
Right? Is that now you're just lying to yourself, and then now you lose integrity with yourself and everything else that comes with that, which is honestly the bigger issue.
Oh, exactly. And because you believe your own lies.
Right.
I would believe the bullshit stories that I told to others. I started to accept those as my truths, and it totally skews your sense of reality. And how could you work on yourself and improve if you don't have an accurate picture of what you need to improve upon, right? Like, self-improvement requires a degree of being honestly reflecting on yourself. And I like to think that I've gotten significantly better at that. And This is something my wife and I talk about a lot, which is like, how do you communicate to a harsh truth to yourself? I actually, driving into work this morning, I was like, I'm not good enough at X, Y, and Z. And I'm not saying that to like diminish myself. I'm just saying like my skill set in these areas aren't good enough to grow the business. So I need to get better at it. And she doesn't relate to the way I phrase it like that. And so we talk about it. She's like, well, why do you know, like, well, you know, I think it's like this. And we go back and forth. But like for me, that drives me. I'm like, you know what? I am not good enough at this. Like, let's just say I'm not good enough at getting more customers. Why am I not good enough at getting more customers? What skill would make me better at getting more customers? You know, what does getting more customers mean? Does it mean this, that, anything? Or years ago, it used to be like, I don't know our numbers. Like, I don't even know how to read a profit and loss statement. Like, I don't even know how to put a profit and loss statement together. Like, I get that we have QuickBooks, but like, I don't get it. And so it's like, well, I'm not good enough at managing our cash flow. So like, what do I need to get better at to manage our cash flow?
People so underestimate how important it is to be able to articulate the problem that we're dealing with. It's one of my favorite reasons to journal is that once you like take the actual problem or the thing that's actually happening or the thing that you're working on, and this could be anything. This isn't even just like business related. Whatever it is, whatever the problem it is that you think you're facing for that matter, I will write it down and I'll try to put it into words that look at it, because like once you see the words and you honestly like almost disconnect from it, now you can look at it clearly and go like, okay, that's what's going on, or that's the issue I think I'm facing. What would be the solution to that issue? And to your point earlier of like, that just leads you down a rabbit hole of like question, answer, question, answer, question, answer before you can actually figure out what you need to do. But to be able to articulate even what you think the problem is from the get-go is so important.
100%. Like, I try to teach that at our company all the time. It's like, why don't you just write that down and then send it to me? That we had like, managing people is fucking crazy. Like, people are just all over the place, including myself and all humans. And like a few weeks ago, there was just like this tension. Like, there was a sub team within the team that they were just clashing, and some comments that weren't in line with our values were made, or actions were taken that weren't in line with the values. And somebody came complaining to me like, this keeps happening, blah 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 blah. And I got pissed. I was like, man, fuck that. That's not going to fucking happen around here. And I was like ready to pull this person aside and be like, if you don't fucking fix this, like, you're fucking out of here, buddy. Like, that shit's not going to fly. Man, I was red in the face, dude. And I was like, I was ready to take action. I whipped out this notebook I had here and I was like, why am I angry? And I just tried to write it down instead. And then we have like a monthly check-in format, which is like, what's gone well, what could improve, is there anything urgent that needs to be addressed? So I started writing out about this person, like, what did they do well, what could improve? And just by virtue of like trying to write it down, I was like, I'm having a much easier time articulating what this person does well than what bothers me about them. And just by like struggling with the what could improve part of it, I was like, oh, I'm just like being frustrated right now, or I just got triggered. And the person who delivered that news to me was also triggered. And so I was like, okay, the way to handle this is not to pull this person aside and ream them. In fact, I'm just going to like send a Slack message to this person to give me feedback on what they think could be improved right now. And it just like opened up this, like, for the last 2 weeks, it was as simple as like organization could be better. Like the R&D plan for Wednesday and Sunday could be better. Like, he didn't know what was going to happen. And so it was making people like blow up on each other. And I was like, oh, we just need a better R&D plan. And it just needs to be communicated better.
There's that, it's the disconnect, right? I don't know the actual psychological phrase for that, but like getting it out of your head onto paper literally disconnects it from like just that emotional side, the limbic brain, the lizard brain, whatever you want to call it, right? Is like all of a sudden it sets it out in front of you like it's different from you. I literally actually just this morning, I recently learned about this exercise. It's called a crap board. And I might fuck up what these all are, but it was like, I can't remember what they stand for. But essentially it was like all your fears and insecurities and problems and things you procrastinate. And basically what you're supposed to do is you write it on a piece of paper and you look at it, and it's like all these like things that you worry about in your life. And then you sit there and just like calmly look at it, and you kind of just like rub your hands and you take some deep breaths. And the point of it isn't to look at it and throw it away. The point of it is actually to look at it, and then now I have it on my mirror in my bathroom, and to look at it and to essentially like teach yourself to feel okay with those insecurities or those fears or worries that you have, so that they don't take control of you, so that you can look at them and be like, oh yeah. Like that's what's going on. Like those are essentially my triggers. And so I literally just did this the other day to see like what happens from it. So I'll be curious to see where this goes. But it's just that point of like, there's something that happens from getting it from your internal system onto a page of paper that just makes it so much farther from who you are as a human that it works for whatever reason.
Totally. It's one of the tools from sobriety that has served me in my everyday, which is like a daily inventory. Initially, you like think of it as an evening inventory, but now it's just like in the moment. So like if I'm upset about something, I do what I did. But it's also like, I'll do this with my wife all the time. She's like pissing me off about something. Like I'm just getting fucking worked up. I'm like, God, you're so wrong. And I'm like, oh, I'm resentful right now. Okay, why am I resentful?
Totally.
What's it affecting? It's affecting my sense of self. It's affecting how I view myself or how others view me. Like, okay, what's my role in it? Well, my role in it is this, or I could have done this better. And it's like, okay, do I need to make amends? Do I need to apologize for anything? Yes. Okay. Hey, I was wrong for doing this. That's it. I'm not going to grovel. I was wrong for doing this. And then it's like, okay, cool. And then we move on. Like I had to do that with my investor the other day. Man, I'm like a very patient guy, but like if I feel like this probably goes back to childhood, but like if I feel like you are trying to tell me what to do, I'm going to fucking tell you what the fuck I think. And
no wonder you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah, exactly. And so like our investor was like, yeah, like y'all need to focus on this, and this, and like, you know, whatever. And I'm like, dude, you are so your priorities are so fucking wrong. Like I didn't cuss at him, but I was just like, I'm like, you are wrong. Like I could feel my wife texted me. She's like, are you okay? Like she texted me. I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I was like, he really pissed me off. And she's like, I could tell. And she's like, you don't usually do that. And I'm like, I know. And so anyways, I had to call him the next day, and I was like, listen, you are just trying to help us. And, you know, I was wrong for talking to you that way. And he goes, cool, thanks. And like just that act of cleaning things up when you need to clean something up is another one of those things that's like super simple, but totally. Are you doing it?
Totally.
You know?
Yeah, I think entrepreneurs are pretty naturally disagreeable. That's honestly how I got into it. Yeah. I had many disputes with other bosses and managers and whatever because I just didn't always agree with what they said.
Yeah.
So just to like basically kind of recap here things in terms of like grandparents was in the Burger King business. That's kind of the start of entrepreneurship. You went to college and did your junk food business, eventually transitioned to doing some mentoring in terms of like course, what's it called? SAT training, basically?
Yeah, just tutoring.
And then you got asked to essentially start the business you're starting now. We've seen the growing of this business for the past, 6 years it's been?
Yeah, almost.
Oh my gosh, man. So that leads me to, what's the vision? Where are you going? Where do you see things ending up in the future here?
Yeah, I know for sure that in the next 5 years, because there's so many uncontrollables, I like to set like a floor and a ceiling for my goals. I heard that on a podcast. I was like, okay. And so my floor is 30 million. My ceiling is 100. So like, that's not to brag. It's more like if I had the skills, going back to good enough, if I had the skills to grow a $30 million business, we'd be at 30 million right now. So those are just measurements of like the skill set that I've acquired and developed.
Totally.
I always tell my wife that when this stops becoming interesting to me, then I'll be done. But until like I can't continue to see a vision in front of where we're at, then I'm in it. And I can see myself doing this for the rest of my life. And maybe in 5 years, I'll wake up and be like, you know what, this is not that interesting to me anymore. And hopefully the intent is to build such a valuable business at every step of the way that having the option to sell it at any time is there, but that's not like my quote unquote exit strategy.
Right.
Every time somebody says like, what's your exit strategy? I'm like, I'm not building to flip this thing. Like, this is like a fucking work of art for me. Like, this is amazing. I'm just in it. I just want to do this. This is fun as hell for me, and it's stressful as hell. But like, dude, you're going to be stressed no matter what. That's a human condition. Like, life is stressful. You're going to have to navigate some form of stress. So I'm like, I totally choose this.
Totally. Whether it's the stress of a boss or the stress of building a business, either way, I'd choose the latter every time.
Yeah.
I got some 10 rapid fire questions. This can be the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
Ready? Best business advice
is to just keep going.
Favorite part about entrepreneurship?
The hustle.
I like that.
Yeah.
Best marketing advice?
Word of mouth. If you don't have it, you ain't got shit.
It's true. When are you the most productive?
Morning.
Who is your inspiration?
My dad is the first thing that came to mind, but I have a lot. Yeah.
Tell me one secret about you or something that most people don't know about you.
I like to sing in like weird accents at home, like Irish accent, Jamaican accent, Mexican accent. Like, my wife gets to enjoy that. Nobody else.
That's one of the best ones I've heard. What would you change about yourself?
I'd be faster.
What is success for you?
The cliche is obviously, to follow your unique path, to like create your own unique path. But for me, it's really to build my business as big as I can to give more to the planet than we can take. As soon as like, if we have to grow to 101 million and that starts like going against the mission, I'm out. I'm out.
When were you the happiest?
Every day.
Hell yeah, man. Favorite part about Austin?
Town Lake.
Town Lake, okay.
Yeah.
Why?
I love the trail.
All right.
Dude, that trail is like, I think of it as like this just like energy force field. Like any time of day you go out there, there's just, everybody's just being their best self, like being healthy, sweating. They're probably with friends or maybe they're alone and they're just like, they're like ramping up their vibration and their energy, and I just feel like it just like totally feeds the city. Like that's what it is for me.
And their dog.
And the dogs, like, it makes me sad to see the condition of the water over the last 2 years. Yeah. But yeah, that's my favorite part.
I walk that trail every day. And so I literally just signed up for Rover because I was like, fuck it. I walk this every day. I might as well walk a dog. You know what Rover is?
Where you walk other people's dogs?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
So if you know anybody around Town Lake that wants their dog walked, I'll take them.
Okay. we would use WAG, but I guess
same deal.
Yeah, you're on there?
No, but it's the same
it's the
concept.
same thing. I'll tell my wife about Rover.
Yeah. I might have to get on WAG now. I didn't realize that was the one to be on.
Yeah, we were using WAG.
Well, I did the Rover one because you can also do can you do house sitting on WAG?
I think so.
Oh, fuck. Well, I'm fucking up. So I have one other question, but before I ask that question, I just want to acknowledge you, man, for just this mission behind really trying to make the world a better place in a lot of ways, in people's dietary habits, in saving the planet in terms of just like creating something that's regenerative, that's actually supporting the local farmers, to for sure supporting the Austin community. Obviously, there's a ton of people that are totally backing what you guys are doing. Yeah. And honestly, for creating an incredible product. Like we said in the beginning of this conversation, like I've been able to try it and it's incredible. I'm not even just saying that because you gave it to me. Like it's some of the best meals I've had without question.
Thank you.
So I just want to acknowledge for what you guys are doing. I think it's awesome. And your ability to somehow manage this with a wife, which is like, I feel like goes leaps and bounds. Because a lot of people can do that. So that's cool. Where can people find you? Where can people find out more about you?
It's Prep to Your Door, PREP to Your Door on all social media. Faiez Rana. You'll probably want to look at the show notes for the spelling. But in about 12 weeks, we'll actually have a brand new brand name. So yeah, we're rebranding completely. That was kind of the beginning phase. It was like, don't obsess about a name. Like, what are we going to call ourselves? Prep to your door. Okay, cool. Let's go. And I was like, we're not going to invest in a fancy logo or colors or design or any of that. We need to know if this is going to work. 5.5 years later, we're like, okay, we have the resources. We want to go out of the region next, like scale outside of Texas. It's time. Let's hire some pros and let's get a name that we actually love, because we've always been like, man, this fucking name is bullshit.
Hell yeah. Well, by the time this episode comes out,
Yeah.
maybe we'll know more about that.
Yeah, let's see.
All right. Cool. Final question. So a lot of people that listen to the show are obviously entrepreneurial, hearted, spirited, oftentimes earlier in their business, beginning stages, or even just like looking for new business ideas. What's maybe the best piece of advice you could give somebody if they were to start over from ground zero, or basically like what are the things they could focus on? What are some initial steps they should be taking? Like what is just like your best piece of advice for someone that's like, all right, I want to start a business. What the fuck do I do?
Get somebody to give you $1. There you go.
That's incredible.
And then once they do, figure out why and keep doing that. There you go. Just, it's simple, but do it.
I love that.
Yeah.
Appreciate you being on the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, brother.
Yeah.
Peace.